I never thought something so big could start from something so small. It's funny how life works that way. You go to a party, you have a few drinks, laugh with friends, and then something shifts without you even realizing it. That's how it started, anyway. It was just one of those nights. Nothing too special. John, my husband, had invited some of his friends over to our house. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. The same group of people, the same chatter about work, sports, and whatever new series everyone was watching. I always loved being surrounded by our friends, but lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that things between John and me weren't as alive as they used to be. Our marriage, I mean. It was comfortable, sure. But there was no spark, no excitement. And if I'm being honest with myself, I felt like we were both just going through the motions. John was busy, as usual, talking to his friends in the corner of the living room. He didn't even seem to notice when I slipped into the kitchen to get another glass of wine. We'd been married for almost 5 years at that point, and it was starting to feel like we'd lost some of that initial excitement we had. I wanted to feel like I mattered again, like I wasn't just someone he took for granted. Then there was Tom. Tom was one of John's oldest friends. I always liked him, but over time, I started noticing something in the way he looked at me. It wasn't overt, but it was there. A glance that lingered just a little longer than necessary, a compliment that was a bit too personal. At first, I brushed it off. But as time went on, it started to make me feel something. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe I was just bored. Anyway, that night I was sitting on the couch listening to some random conversation, and Tom came over to me. He smiled, and it felt genuine. He asked if I wanted him to take a picture of me. I thought it was odd but agreed, figuring it was just a friendly gesture. I didn't even think about it, but as I stood up and posed for the photo, I felt his eyes on me a little differently. It was as if he was noticing me in a way John hadn't in a long time. John was busy with some of the guys, and I felt a little out of place, so I let Tom take the picture. He said something like, "You know, you look really good tonight, Sarah. You should smile more, you know. You've got that killer look." It was one of those offhand comments that could have been dismissed as nothing. But it stayed with me. John snapped the picture and handed me my phone back, but before I could walk away, Tom suggested, "How about I take another one? From a different angle. You know, like a cool shot from above." It was a bit strange, but I went along with it. What harm could there be in one more photo? So I went up to the small platform near the window, the one that overlooks the living room. Tom stood below, adjusting the camera. I posed, feeling a bit silly, but there was something about it that made me feel noticed, like I mattered. Tom's eyes never left me as he fiddled with the camera. I looked down, and his smile was more confident this time, a little playful. "Perfect," he said, his voice almost a little husky. I didn't think much of it. Just a comment about a photo. But the longer he looked at me, the more I realized how much I was enjoying this attention. I knew it was nothing, but I couldn't help it. I felt seen. John didn't seem to notice anything was off. He was talking to the others, as he usually did. But the longer I stood there, the more aware I became of how different Tom made me feel. I mean, I hadn't felt anything like that in a long time. A feeling of being wanted, of being more than just someone's wife. It was a strange, thrilling feeling. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, I came down. The moment passed. Tom made some joke about how he'd be the official photographer from now on, and I just laughed. It wasn't a big deal. At least, not in the moment. It wasn't like I had any intention of doing anything crazy. I was just enjoying the attention. Right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Something had shifted. Maybe it was the way Tom looked at me. Maybe it was the way he made me feel when no one else seemed to notice. I wasn't sure, but I could tell this wasn't just a casual exchange. I brushed it off. I told myself it was nothing, just a compliment, just a little harmless flirting. I was married after all. I loved John, right? This was just some temporary thing, a fleeting moment of feeling desirable. Nothing to get worked up about. But later that night, as I lay in bed next to John, I couldn't help but replay the evening in my head. Tom's smile, his eyes, the way he had taken the time to make me feel like I was worth noticing. Maybe it wasn't so harmless after all. The next week, it wasn't just one awkward moment. It was like the universe was conspiring to make me notice Tom even more. At first, I tried to shake it off, telling myself that I was just imagining things. But it kept happening. Every time we saw him, He'd find a way to get close, to make me feel like I was special in a way I hadn't felt in a while. His compliments became more frequent, and his looks lingered longer. The little things, his casual touch on my arm, the way his voice dropped when he said something to me. It all started to make me feel things I hadn't felt in a long time. That Friday night, we were having another one of those get-togethers. John was in the kitchen, preparing drinks with the guys, and I was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, feeling oddly restless. I noticed Tom standing near the window, looking out at the view. When our eyes met, he gave me a little smile, just like the one from the last party. It wasn't anything huge, just a subtle shift in the air between us. "Hey Sarah," he said, walking over to me. "You still up for those photos? I got some new ideas for shots." I hesitated for a moment. I didn't want to seem too eager, but I was curious. There was something about the way he said it, the way his voice held that gentle, playful tone that made me want to say yes. "Sure," I said, almost too casually. "What did you have in mind?" Tom's grin widened. "Well, I was thinking, maybe this time you could get up there, on the platform again. I have a new angle in mind." I glanced at John, who was laughing with his friends, and then back at Tom. Something about his words felt different this time. More intentional, but I pushed the thought aside. It was just a photo, right? I climbed up onto the platform, and Tom stood below, positioning his camera. The moment I settled into place, I could feel his gaze on me. It wasn't like the first time, when it had felt innocent. No, this time, there was something charged in the air. His eyes followed me. Not just as a photographer, but as a man looking at a woman. I felt a little nervous, but part of me liked it. "Perfect," he said, adjusting his lens. "You look amazing, Sarah. You have no idea how good you look up there." I blushed, surprised by how much his words affected me. A part of me wanted to brush it off, but I couldn't. I wasn't used to hearing these things from John anymore. He used to compliment me all the time, but now, it had become rare. Tom's attention felt like a spark, and I was drawn to it in a way I didn't fully understand. "You really think so?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. The question came out almost shy, like I needed confirmation. It was silly, I know, but in that moment, it felt real. It felt like I mattered. Tom took a step closer, his camera still in hand. "I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it," he said, his tone serious now, almost intimate. "You're incredible, Sarah." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt a flush creep up my neck. It was like we were the only two people in the room, even though the party was still going on around us. John was still distracted with his friends, and I could hear their laughter in the background, but it was as if I had tuned everything else out. Tom stepped back to adjust the camera again, but this time, he didn't look away. His eyes stayed locked on me, and I could see the way his pupils dilated. I felt exposed, but it wasn't in a bad way. It was almost like he was seeing me for the first time, really seeing me, and I liked it. The click of the camera broke the moment, and Tom moved back. "I think we got it," he said. But he didn't immediately turn to leave. He stood there, watching me for a moment longer than necessary. I felt a little embarrassed now, unsure of what I was doing, or why I was letting this happen. But I didn't move. I just stood there, unsure how to react. He finally lowered the camera, still smiling. "You're a natural, you know that," Tom said, his voice dropping a little. "You should be in front of the camera more often. You've got this whole thing going on." I swallowed hard. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the shaky note in my voice. And then, without really thinking about it, I said, "Maybe we could do this more often. You know, take more pictures sometime. It's kind of fun." Tom grinned. "I'm down," he said, and there was a hint of something more in his smile, something that made my heart skip a beat. "I'll make sure you look even better next time." He walked off after that, blending back into the crowd, but the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd talked to me, stayed with me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like a magnet, pulling at something deep inside me that I had tried to ignore for so long. The excitement, the thrill of being seen, of being desired, of being someone other than just a wife. I didn't want to admit it, but I couldn't deny it either. As the night wore on, I couldn't help but glance at Tom every now and then. I saw him chatting with the guys, but I noticed how his eyes kept flicking back to me. I should have been focused on my husband, but all I could think about was the way Tom had looked at me just a few moments ago. The attention he gave me felt electric. And deep down I knew I was starting to crave more of it. It wasn't supposed to go any further. I told myself that every time Tom flashed me that smile, every time his eyes lingered a little too long. But there was something in the way he made me feel. Something that was missing from my marriage. I didn't want to admit it, but I was starting to feel a shift inside me. I wanted more. More of the attention, more of the thrill, more of the excitement. And that night, something inside me broke. The following weekend, we had another gathering. John was busy in the kitchen with his friends, and I felt that familiar restlessness building up again. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew it wasn't with John at the moment. I wasn't unhappy with him exactly, but I was bored. We hadn't been intimate in what felt like weeks, and even when we did share a moment, it felt routine. I wasn't even sure he noticed the little things anymore, like when I put on a new dress or wore my hair differently. I wanted to feel desired. I wanted to feel alive again, and that's when I knew. I was looking for something with Tom. He was there, of course. I kept catching him looking at me across the room. His eyes never strayed for long, and each time they found me, I felt that flutter in my chest. It wasn't just harmless flirting anymore. There was an undeniable tension between us. I excused myself from the living room and slipped outside to the back patio for a moment of peace. I needed a breath of fresh air. Maybe some space would clear my head, but then I heard the door open behind me, and I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. "Mind if I join you?" Tom asked, his voice low and smooth. I didn't answer right away. I just took a deep breath and looked out into the yard, pretending I wasn't as nervous as I felt. "Sure," I said finally. "I just needed a break." He sat down next to me, not too close but close enough that I could feel the heat of his body. We both stared out into the dark, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. It felt comfortable in a way, but it also felt dangerous. "You know," Tom said after a while, "I can't stop thinking about that shot we took the other night. You really looked incredible. I don't think I've ever seen anyone quite like you." The words hit me harder than I expected. My heart skipped a beat. His voice was calm, steady, but the undercurrent of desire was there. It wasn't just a compliment, it was an invitation. I didn't answer right away. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. I was trying to convince myself that I shouldn't even entertain this. I loved John. I had promised him I would be faithful. But in that moment, I felt like I was at a crossroads, and for the first time in a long time, I was tempted to go down the path that felt more exciting, more dangerous. "I'm not like that, Tom," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but I could feel the lie in my own words. "I'm married, and I don't want to mess everything up." I glanced at him, and his eyes met mine. There was no judgment in them, just understanding. And something else. Something I couldn't put into words. "I get it," he said softly. "But sometimes you deserve more than what you're getting, you know? Life's too short to live in a cage." His words hit me like a wave, crashing over me. It was what I had been thinking all along. I was stuck, caught between my loyalty to John and my longing for something more, something new. But I hadn't expected Tom to give voice to my secret thoughts. I trailed off, unsure of how to finish the sentence. My mind was a whirl of confusion and desire. Tom reached out, just gently placing his hand on my shoulder, his thumb brushing across my skin. The touch was electric, and it felt like my heart had stopped beating. "You don't have to pretend with me, Sarah. I see how you look at me. I know what you want." I couldn't deny it anymore. He was right. I had been looking at him differently. I had been craving his attention in ways I hadn't even fully realized. But now, it was clear, and the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to say yes. Before I knew it, I was leaning in. Our lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. It wasn't rushed or wild, just a simple meeting of mouths. But even that one kiss was enough to send everything crashing down around me. It felt like the world had stopped, like there was only this moment, only him and me. I pulled away quickly, my breath shallow. "Tom, we can't," I started, but he just shook his head, his eyes intense and dark. "Don't say anything," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's too late for that." We didn't speak again after that. He kissed me again, and this time it wasn't soft. It was urgent, hungry, and I let it happen. I didn't know what had come over me. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the tension that had been building up for weeks. But the moment I gave in, I couldn't stop it. We didn't even talk about it after that. I didn't know what to say. Tom didn't press me, and we didn't acknowledge what had just happened. The rest of the night passed in a blur, and when I saw John, I felt the weight of what I'd just done. But there was something inside me, something dark and thrilling, that told me I didn't regret it. Not yet, and that was the worst part. I wasn't sorry. At least, not in that moment. It wasn't supposed to happen again. In fact, I told myself it wouldn't. After that night, I tried to avoid Tom. I didn't want to admit to myself that what we'd done was anything more than a mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a mistake. I couldn't lie about it. I had wanted it, needed it. And if I was being honest with myself, I didn't regret it. Not fully. I tried to pretend like everything was normal after that. John and I went on like we always had, doing the same things, talking about the same things. But there was this thick tension hanging between us, one that neither of us acknowledged, yet it was there, hanging in the air like a cloud. Every time I looked at John, I felt the weight of what I had done. And then, one night, everything came crashing down. It had been a few weeks since the party, and I thought the whole thing had passed. Tom and I had barely exchanged a word after our encounter. There had been moments when he would glance at me, a slight, knowing look in his eyes, but we never spoke about it. It was as if we had both agreed it was better left unsaid. But then John found the messages. I didn't even know he had been going through my phone. It was a stupid mistake, leaving it unlocked, a moment of carelessness I should have avoided. But John found the texts between Tom and me, the ones where we had exchanged flirty comments and more than just the occasional, "How are you?" They were innocent enough on the surface, but anyone who took a second to read between the lines could see what was really going on. John didn't confront me right away. Instead, he sat in silence, staring at his phone, his face going pale. I knew something was off when I walked into the living room, and he didn't immediately look up at me. "John," I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. "What's going on?" He didn't answer at first. The tension in the room was thick, like I could almost feel his disappointment radiating off him. Finally, he turned the phone around and shoved it in my face. The messages were there, proof of everything I had tried to deny. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and tight. "What the hell is this? Explain this to me." I stared at the screen for a moment, my heart racing. I had no words, no excuses. The truth was staring me in the face, and I couldn't run from it anymore. "John, I trailed off, not knowing what to say. "How do you explain something like this? How do you justify betraying the person you promised to love and honor?" John stood up, his hands shaking with barely contained anger. "You've been seeing him, haven't you? All this time, you've been with him. I can't believe this, Sarah." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. There was nothing I could say that would make this better. I had cheated. I had let myself get lost in something that wasn't worth it. I had hurt him. "I'm sorry," I said finally, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I don't know how it happened, everything's been so empty. With me. I felt like I needed something more. I know it's no excuse, but I didn't know what to do." John's expression softened for a moment, but the hurt was still there, deep in his eyes. "So, you thought that just throwing everything away was the answer? You thought going behind my back would fill whatever was missing?" I nodded, feeling the weight of the reality settle over me. I had been selfish, thinking only of my own needs, my own desires. I never stopped to think about how it would affect him, how much I was risking. I had let myself be caught up in a moment of weakness, and now it was all falling apart. "I'm so sorry, John. I never meant to hurt you. I don't even know what I was thinking. I got caught up in it, in how Tom made me feel. He made me feel seen, you know? I just wanted to feel like I mattered again." John let out a bitter laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. "And what about me, Sarah? Don't I make you feel like you matter? Haven't I been here for you all this time?" His words cut deeper than anything else he could have said. Of course, I knew he had been there for me. I knew he loved me, and I loved him too, in my own way. But it wasn't enough anymore. Or at least, I thought it wasn't. But now, looking at him, seeing the hurt, the pain in his eyes, I realized I had just thrown away something so precious. "I don't know what's wrong with me, John," I said, my voice breaking. "I've been selfish. I didn't appreciate you, and I didn't realize how much I was going to hurt you by doing this. I'm sorry." John was silent for a long moment, staring at the floor. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, filled with a mix of anger and hurt. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Sarah. I don't know if I even want to try." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had known this was coming, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so much more real. "I don't expect you to forgive me," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly lost. The world around me felt like it was crumbling. The truth was out now, and everything had changed. I couldn't undo what I had done. I couldn't take back the choices I had made, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. Would John stay with me? Would he ever look at me the same way again? Or was this the end of everything we had built together? All I knew for sure was that I had crossed a line, and no matter how much I wanted to go back, I couldn't undo the damage. Not now. Not ever. The weeks that followed were filled with silence, an uncomfortable, suffocating silence. John and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was through gritted teeth, each word heavy with unspoken resentment. The gap between us, the trust that had been shattered, seemed impossible to bridge. He couldn't look at me without seeing the betrayal, and I couldn't look at him without feeling the weight of the choices I had made. I moved out for a while. Not because John asked me to, but because I knew it was what we both needed. The house felt too small, too suffocating, with every corner reminding me of what I had destroyed. I stayed with a friend, trying to give us both space to breathe, to think. But every day, I felt the emptiness of my own actions, the hollow echo of my regret. John and I spoke occasionally, but it wasn't the same. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cool, painful distance. There was no easy fix, no magic word to erase what I had done. We tried therapy, but even that felt like a formality. I could see it in his eyes. The love was still there, but it was mixed with anger, with hurt, and with a growing realization that things might never be the same again. As for Tom, I never saw him again. The guilt was too much to bear. I couldn't face him, not after what I had allowed to happen. He was a moment, a mistake, a distraction from something I should have fought for. Life went on, but I would never forget the lessons I learned. Sometimes, the things we take for granted are the ones most worth fighting for. And sometimes, it's too late by the time we realize it.